Hello and welcome to this edition of Conversations with the Mayor. As always, sitting here with Mayor Brian Arrigo for a half hour or so of some great conversation talking about some of the hot topics within the city. Yeah, how you doing?
I'm doing great,
Yeah.
Ed. Good to be here, and thanks for having me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. I think these are great. I wish we could do more of them. So basically, I thought we might start off in talking about, some of the, I'll call it general city administration issues, budget update. We all know that there's been a change in your administration with Omar leaving and try to get a sense for what's going to be happening in those areas.
Yeah, so in terms of the budget, the City Council actually last night passed our budget for the fiscal year of 2018. We have around a 3% increase in spending, and we've already heard from bond rating agencies giving us a positive outlook that we are in great financial shape, and in keeping that 3% line of spending and really being able to hold the line on spending while making significant investments in areas that will increase services for residents has been really important. So I've talked a lot about, over the last year and a half, about 311, which is a one call to City Hall. That is fully funded in this fiscal 18 budget. I've talked a lot about HR and bringing HR practices to the City of Revere. That is fully funded in this year's budget, and I'm happy to announce that we will be having an HR director on board starting July 10th, Revere resident. And I'm very excited for those investments in really city services and making sure that we're providing quality city services to our residents, really what they deserve. Other kind of financial implications, we've got almost all of our union contracts negotiated.
I saw that, yeah.
And we are, we have money available to pay for those. We've budgeted for those union contracts, which is something that bond rating agencies look at. They want to see that you're making that investment. We also were able to make an investment in capital improvements, and we're going to be bringing to the City Council a capital improvement plan. We've used $1 million in free cash to help fund capital projects. So really, in terms of budget and financial issues in the city, we're holding the line on spending. And what that does and what that allows me to do, as mayor, is to turn around and reinvest and look to reinvest. And what we've done before the council, what I've proposed to the council is to get on the ballot this November a 10% senior exemption. And what's exciting about that is that it gives us the ability to reinvest in some of our most vulnerable populations, and specifically, seniors who are living and own their own home. Obviously, property values continue to increase, which is a good thing. We don't want property values to decrease, but it does put additional burden on folks who are on a fixed income. Recognizing that and recognizing the fact that we're in good financial position, I went to the council and asked them to approve to put on the ballot that 10% senior exemption. And the reason why we have to go to the ballot is state law. So unfortunately, we have these additional hoops that we have to go through. But very quickly, to just explain what the 10% senior tax exemption is, what we will do as a city is look at the average assessed value for all properties in the city, take 10% of that, whatever that amount is. So for just kind of off the cuff, say the average assessed value is $300,000. 10% would be $30,000. $30,000 would then come off of your assessment for your property, right? And so for qualified senior citizens, what we're looking at are probably in the range of 1,000 folks who would end up qualifying for this, and it's really a first step. In my opinion, the way that I look at it is a first step towards that kind of relief citywide. But this is a great first step, something that the council unanimously supported, and I look forward to talking to folks about it in November, and making sure that it ends up getting past the ballot process.
Yeah. You know, it brings a question, and I don't know if you have the answer here, and forgive me if I'm putting you on the spot in a sense, but what is the percentage of the Revere population that's senior population? Do you have a sense for what that is?
I do not know that off.
Okay,
I
I was just
wouldn't
curious,
even-
as you were
wouldn't wanna
talking, I was thinking
put
about
a number
No
out
worries,
there and then
no worries.
and then have somebody come back and
Just
say.
didn't know if that number was out there.
Right. And so to move a little bit, from the budget side, you had mentioned the chief administrative
Yes.
officer for the city moving on. As I think a lot of people understand, he had a residency waiver that was extended to June 30th. So June 30th is upon us, and so that will expire, and he will no longer be able to work for the city. But it really is a big loss for the city and for my office. But we're looking at kind of reconfiguring and being able to kind of use this time to recalibrate a little bit and be able to make sure that we're still providing the best services to the residents, and we've got top-notch quality people working for the city.
So basically, you're going to pull together whoever's still left,
What?
Joe, and company,
we'll
Debbie,
pull
all those
folks
people in the
together,
office,
right,
and then
and we'll
maybe not necessarily replace the CAO, but maybe
Right.
come up with another configuration that brings in a person maybe to help in certain areas.
Right, and I think I don't see somebody filling the CAO position. I think that was a broad position, and that was broad and tailored to Omar because I knew his skills. I knew what he could bring to the table. There are very few people that can bring the talent and the skills and the qualities that he brought to my office. So it may not be a CAO position, but it may be a chief of staff or some combination of things. Yeah.
And quickly, coming back slightly to the budget, and you mentioned city services, and you also mentioned the senior, if you will, rebate, for lack of a better word,
Right.
on the taxes. Looking at property taxes overall, and as you said, the property values are going up. At some point in time, you look at possibly reducing the tax rate. Now, you're taking I'll say, for lack of a better word, half step towards doing that to apply to seniors.
Right.
Do you foresee maybe additional tax adjustments going forward? And
So as we make sure that we're getting significant investment on the commercial side, and we're seeing that before the council last night, we had a hotel group that came in and is proposing 8 or 9 story hotel on Revere Beach Boulevard. That single investment would be the largest commercial investment down the beach in over 20 years. So having those kinds of investments and that kind of commercial tax revenue generated in the city will end up allowing me to provide tax relief, along as property values continue to increase, and as we kind of hold the line on spending, we can end up looking at a further exemption for owner-occupied properties.
And of course, the other area that people look to when they look at city services is everybody talks about streets and sidewalks.
Absolutely.
And so looking at holding the line at 3% and so forth, does that have any impact, improvements to it, lessens it? Where are we with the funding and the services in that respect?
Right. So the approach that I've taken is to try to make sure that we are providing services on streets and sidewalks that people can see, because that really is the bread and butter for a lot of the work that I do every day. And if we can fund those things in different ways, we will do that. And so this year, we had free cash certified that was brought before the council in May, and we ended up appropriating $200,000 out of free cash.
Yep.
So free cash is kind of like one-time expenditures. Took $200,000 of free cash, put it towards our sidewalk backlog, and we're working through that. And we've gotten a lot of great feedback about the fact that we are making that investment, and that investment ends up being something that doesn't hit the taxpayer necessarily in terms of the budget going up, or we're able to hold the line on spending operationally, but also make investments that people see. So to get rid of a backlog, we had about a 3-year backlog of sidewalk improvements. We're working through those. I'm excited about seeing those bread and butter things come to life and end up being able to provide those services to residents, because I want them to know that we are working every day to make sure that we can provide the best services to them.
Yeah, and in relation to that, as you were talking earlier, and you hit upon it with the 3-year backlog, so you try and look at some sort of measurement. What's the spending this year versus last year, and projection going forward? So you got that 3-year backlog, and are you a year and a half into that? Are you trying to get some sort of idea where you're at with it?
We're hoping
space of time you've been doing it.
eliminate. Right, we want to eliminate the backlog. And so, like I said, it was a 3-year backlog. We want to eliminate that backlog and then be able to put in, going forward, have some pocket of money, and it may be from free cash or from whatever we can cobble together to be able to address sidewalk and sidewalk issues as they come up. And so if we can make sure that we don't have those kinds of backlogs, and that we do and reinvest, and then on top of it is having a capital improvement plan, that's a part of that, a portion of that money will be for streets and sidewalks, because we only get around $800,000 a year from Chapter 90 money, and that's money from the state that we get for specifically for streets and sidewalks. That money is good for, just rounding off, probably 6 or 7 streets a year. Not a lot of streets to reconstruct. So whatever money we can put aside, in addition to the money that we get from the state, I want to do that, because again, it comes down to bread and butter of city government and people seeing their tax dollars at work.
Right.
Yeah.
So most people you talk to is first taxes, streets and
Streets
sidewalks.
and sidewalks, right.
Exactly.
And parking.
Parking, yeah. And that could be another subject, but we won't go there right now because we only have a half an hour or so. You also mentioned 311, and here again, I don't want to get too far into that. You've talked about that. Where are you in the rollout in particular?
Right. So we've actually hired a supervisor and a call taker, and those folks have come online. We're going to do a soft launch during the summer, and we'll have an official launch sometime in the fall.
And getting back to those streets and sidewalks issues and so forth, that's going to be the go-to place to call in and say, hey, I got a pothole in my street that needs to be fixed or whatever.
Exactly. And so 311 is the one call to City Hall that if any resident has an issue or a service request, we're going to ask them to call 311, and that will be the place where they'll get very high quality customer service, and that they'll be ensured that their issue gets dealt with, and that they get the feedback. Because what we've heard from people, and I live this every day, so I hear that sometimes between SeeClickFix and calling the mayor's office and calling my ward counselor, you may not know exactly where an issue lies. If we can just be transparent and open and let people know exactly where their issues are and give them a high level of customer service, that's what we want to do, and that's what we want to provide.
And this is probably the last question in this here, I promise, because we've got a couple of other topics I definitely want to move on to. But when you look at all of those things, 311 is there, you got money coming in, DPW is a big part of that.
Right.
Talk a little bit about, because I know you've got a new tar machine, or for lack of a better word, for patching some of those potholes, and you're doing some other things in there. Talk about what's going on in the DPW to help you get those things.
Right. So we've made a significant investment in equipment down to DPW. We last year put a bond together, bond authorization that would allow us to be able to give them the equipment and the tools that they need to succeed. And I'm looking forward to them having those tools, and then ultimately what I'd like to do is get to a point where we give them additional manpower, and that they can have really the manpower to deal with all the issues that they have to deal with. On the horizon and even longer term is their facility. Everyone knows that their facility is in very tough shape. We've had an assessment done of the building to give us some kind of options in terms of what we can do going forward. I look forward to kind of communicating that to the council, letting them know about where we stand, and then figuring out what options we're going to go with. But it's a kind of multi-stepped and long-term kind of strategic plan
Yeah.
for every department. But DPW ends up being really important in terms of people knowing where their tax dollars is being spent, and when you call to get a pothole fixed, that it gets done relatively quickly,
Yep.
and that they have the tools and the manpower to do it.
Yeah, that's the sweet spot in constituent service.
It
is
is.
DPW and all of those sort of
Right.
things they come up with. All right, so moving along, like to get to the police chief, the selection, where things stand in that. And I guess let's start off with talking about why the change. To be honest with you, I was a little surprised when I saw the Journal earlier this year when you opted not to renew the chief's contract, and the question came to mind, well, why? It seems to be good. Things seem to be going good,
Right.
but so.
Right. So Chief Caffarelli's contract was up, or is up, June 30th of this year. I chose to not renew that contract. I informed the chief of that, and he did have the opportunity to kind of reapply if he so chose to.
Okay, yep.
And because I wanted to do an assessment center, I wanted to make sure that I make a strong decision and that we use best practices in making that decision.
Mm-hmm.
I know that this is something that's going to be very important to the community.
For sure.
And is an issue that I have to get right. And so, I spoke to the chief at length and discussed the fact that I wasn't planning to renew his contract, which I had to do by contract. And that contract was not one that I negotiated. I explained that to him, and that I would prefer to have my own contract. And I'll let other personnel and HR issues kind of aside, but that I can't get into. But I will say that what we look forward to and what I look forward to is making sure that we use best practices and that we get the department that the men and women in that department deserve, and that the residents deserve. And that's why, I'll get into the assessment and what we ended up doing.
That was my next question.
I made
Go right to it.
right as I made the decision to not renew Chief Caffarelli, I also made the decision to have an assessment center that would take any candidates who were interested in the position. Again, Chief Caffarelli did have the opportunity to engage in that assessment. He chose not to, but what we did was make sure that we follow best practices, and ended up getting somebody who is very, very well known and well respected in the public safety and police community. Chief Ryan of the Arlington Police Department. He came in and did the assessment. By state law, I am limited in who I could choose for a chief. Not many people understand this or know this, but by state law, I could only pick a lieutenant with 5 years or a captain within the police department. So not necessarily as wide of a net as I'd like to cast. We had the assessment center. Unfortunately, nobody really rose to the level that the assessors thought we should be at. We had 3 chiefs independent, of Chief Ryan, 3 independent chiefs who do not know any of the candidates, who have to, ensure that they don't have any previous relationships or anything like that, come in and do an objective assessment and evaluation of the candidates. And it was I sat in on the assessment the entire day. It was a very stressful, assessment and a stressful day. And I had nothing, I was just watching, and it was stressful. But unfortunately, nobody did come out to the high level
So
that,
this is
that
an
we had expected.
independent body doing
This
the
is it,
assessment
right.
of the candidates from within the
Right,
current police
right.
force.
And using, really getting to the heart of how to make sure that there's a culture of accountability, how to make sure that folks are using the tools that they need whether they be communication tools, technology, to affect and to make sure that community policing is done not only in schools, but it's at the core of what they do every day. We have so many great men and women in that police department, and so many great men and women who do their job and do it well every day. They deserve to have leadership that will provide them the tools, and the outcome of that assessment, and the fact that nobody did rise to the high standard that I have, was that there are some deeper issues in the department that we want to take a look at, and there are things that I want to make sure that we're taking care of. And outside of HR and personnel issues that I can't really discuss, in terms of communication, in terms of using technology, in terms of making sure that there is a culture of accountability, want to make sure that happens. And that's what the men and women on the street who do a very good job every day deserve. That's what the residents deserve, and that's my goal. The fact that some people will say that I'm playing politics with public safety is just wrong. The fact is, I have tried, unlike previous administrations who have just put their own person in and sometimes even paid a very high price to put somebody else in, we're taking a measured approach that has long-term impact and is going to be, at the end of the day, it will provide the best department that the residents deserve, that the men and women who are doing their job every single day in that department deserve, and that we can all be proud of.
Going back to the assessment for a second, because you mentioned Chief Ryan and the other chiefs that were kind of on that board. Right. And so they assessed, and there's a certain criteria that they were looking for in terms of determining whether these people met the standards that you referred to. And you mentioned your high standards. So were your standards established the criteria, or how did that come about? Because the question is always, well, who made the decision? Was it you, based on their recommendation? But is their recommendation based on your criteria? That sort of thing?
So Chief Ryan mentioned this before the council. The decision is mine. I am the appointing authority. The buck stops here. I am the appointing authority.
I'm not looking to pass that.
I'm willing to take all the responsibility. I take all the responsibility for every one of my decisions each and every day. And the fact is that this organizational review of the department is going to really take a deep dive into what we can do better, what we're doing well, and what we're need to maybe improve a little bit. But some of the things that came out during the assessment, and the fact that nobody did rise to that high level, spoke to some of the deeper rooted issues that are within the department.
So going beyond this point, because now it's like go back to the table, as you mentioned earlier, I believe you're going to have an independent body come in and do a study of the department organization and come back with some recommendations about how it should be organized, departments, what are their objectives, goals, and so forth. How long do you expect that study is going to take?
So I hate putting a number on things because it always
always
takes longer than expected. You know that with the visioning process, and I know that's been something that you've asked a lot about.
Wait a minute, I got to put that one down.
Exactly, but we're looking at a timeline of 6 to 9 months, potentially, of having a review. And in that interim time, I have named Captain Gatto interim chief. He is the person most well equipped to handle the duties of chief. He's been executive officer to both Chief Reardon and Chief Caffarelli. He's the current executive officer. That is the number 2 in line. So he's the number 2. He will assume those responsibilities starting July 1st, and he's got 30 plus years and on the force, and has the knowledge and the ability to make sure that in this interim process during this review, that the department can continue to move forward.
So there's going to be this study, and there'll be recommendations about organizations, improvements that need to be made, gaps that need to be filled, and things of that nature. That's 6 to 9 months down the road. Relative to the selection of a police chief, does all that start again after that report comes out?
So,
are we looking to 2018?
There are a couple. This has been a multi-pronged, I guess, decision that I've made in terms of the organizational review, having an interim, and then the final piece of it, and the final step is having the ability to cast a wider net. As I mentioned,
Yes.
I am limited currently by state law. I would like to be able to cast a wider net. So we're going to have ongoing conversations, I'm sure, with the council about that ability and about my ability to cast a wider net.
Yeah.
And we're not looking necessarily outside the department, because I've heard people say, oh, outside the department, you want to go outside. This is, I think, in terms of looking at the organizational review, looking at the structure of the department, and looking at leadership, it's really about putting and having the ability and the wide ability to get leadership that can work together, and whether or not that is a leadership team of multiple individuals, some who may be from inside the department or outside the department. I think that we need to have all the tools, I need to have all the tools at my disposal to make sure that we have a quality chief. So I think that'll be an ongoing conversation during the 6 to 9 months. I'm not going to be able to cast a wider net if the council chooses not to approve a change to the city ordinances and ultimately a home rule petition to the state. So that'll be an ongoing conversation, and I've already talked to councilors individually about some of the issues that have arisen in the department, and some of my steps to correct some of the issues in the department, and they have been, for the most part, very supportive, and I look forward to the ongoing conversation about the direction that we take.
Well, that's great. And so the last, and we are running up against it, believe it or not, we could go on for another hour probably. We could probably talk about economic development when we meet on the beach in another month or so. That would probably be a good time to talk about that along the other things. But just to finish up on the police department, because one of the primary concerns, and I think you somewhat alluded to in your selection of Captain Guido, is that somehow maintaining, for lack of a better word, the status quo, and more importantly, the morale of the department and their ability to perform going forward. I mean, because that's the first thing people think about. Well, it's a ship without a rudder, type of thing. So can you address, that concern and, what you're doing to basically address that?
And I can't say this enough, that the men and women who are in that department and working, on the front lines day in and day out do a fantastic job.
And if I could, because beyond the constituents, they're probably, maybe, if not the next best, the most important piece to that whole thing.
Right.
If they're not happy, they're not performing,
exactly.
and we're not getting what we need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why it's been important, again, it's multifaceted. It's been important for me to get to the bargaining table with them and make sure that we're getting them a union contract that they deserve, and getting them raises that they deserve. We've done that. We've bargained in good faith. We've been able to come to agreements on their contract. I want to give them the tools, monetarily to succeed, but also the tools to succeed at their job.
Yep.
And the organizational review is not meant to be a slap in their face or anything like that. The fact is that I want to give them the tools to succeed, and I want to make sure that the department has that strong leadership, and that we can kind of move forward and make sure that they are propped up and they are given the ability to succeed, and that there's strong leadership in that department, and that we're focusing on community policing, that there's strong communication with the residents and with the community, with my office and with city councilors, and that we're doing everything every day to make sure that the residents of the city are safe.
Well, good luck with it because it's a very important thing, and I know that particularly in terms of public safety and so forth, that is a key issue. Streets and sidewalks are something that everybody
Right.
thinks about, but when things start to go south, and particularly now that this is summertime, it gets a bigger concern. So.
Right.
Good luck in that effort.
Yeah.
And as I said, we've run out of time.
I can't believe that.
And being wary of your schedule and so forth, as I said, we could go on for another hour. So we'll pick up on some of these other subjects. But before we go, I guess, is there any other thing that we haven't hit upon that you would like to
Yeah, so
bring up at this
very
point?
quickly,
Yes.
Wonderland, I know this is one.
Yep.
The demolition permits have been pulled, or applications have been submitted to demo the building. That building will be coming down hopefully this summer. We're looking at probably August. There's some abatement. Obviously, you can imagine that the lead-up work that needs to be
Yep.
done. But you'll see that there are construction fences already put around the building, and that building will be coming down. We had a proposal for a hotel come before the city council on the boulevard. We also have the development, the last phase of Waterfront Square, which will include a hotel, which we're very excited about, and will include restaurant space and the amenities that we've been fighting for, I've been fighting for
Yep.
every single day over the last year and a half. Those things are finally kind of happening.
Coming into place. That was one of my
we're
questions.
excited. We're very excited.
Heard about a hotel up the beach. What about the one that was going out by Wonderland?
Right.
So you've
Yep.
answered that
Yep.
question. Great.
It's coming. It's coming.
Yeah. And then, of course, we have Suffolk Downs, and as I said, when we get together again, because that's a longer
We could do about a
subject.
2-hour show on
We could.
Suffolk Downs alone, and I'm sure there will be a robust community process when it comes to Suffolk
Yep.
Downs. The developers that have taken site control of that property are top-notch. They're quality folks. They've done some great development throughout the Commonwealth, and I look forward to working with them. I look forward to the residents getting to know the quality work that they do, and I know that people will be very excited about what they bring to the table
Yep.
and what they end up coming out with. And as we discuss and as we hear from residents about what they want to see, I know I hear it every day about amenities and about commercial space, and that's why I talk about creating an economy. We have that opportunity with those sites like Wonderland and Suffolk Downs and NECO
Yep.
to create an economy and create that commercial tax base that can end up paying for all the streets and sidewalks and all the great things that we want to see happen in the city.
Speaking of NECO, I mean, just a very quick, it was really kind of interesting to see how well they're doing. I mean, I thought they were kind of on their knees at some
Right.
point. I think
Right.
a lot of people did. So,
Right.
that's encouraging to hear that and to see what's happening over there as well.
Yeah. No, the NECO property is going to be one that is very important to the next 10, 15, and 20 years to the city, and making sure that we're producing a lot of commercial revenue for the community.
I'll throw a plug in for my vision. When I look at Wonderland, every time I travel down the Mass Pike, I look at that New Balance building and the project that's going up there, and I'm saying, that could be Wonderland.
And the great thing is that that site is next to the MBTA, the Blue Line, next to the beach,
Yep.
Next to the commuter rail on the back end. There's a lot of great opportunity, great potential for that
Yeah.
site, and we look forward to making sure that we get the highest and best use out of that site.
Well, once again, Brian.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Like
Yeah.
you said, we could go on for a couple of more hours here, and I would love to do that. Again, for Mayor Arrigo and myself, Ed DeVoe, this has been Conversations with the Mayor, and take care.